Let's talk about the Ramayana. It's one of the world's great epics, a story so many of us know and love. But what if I told you that beneath the surface of this incredible tale of gods and demons, there's a hidden history, a secret that's been hiding in plain sight for thousands of years?
You know the basic story, right? A noble prince, Rama, gets exiled into the forest with his wife Sita. She's then kidnapped by the 10-headed demon king, Ravana. A massive war breaks out, Rama gets help from an army of monkeys, and you've got your classic hero's journey.
But here's the twist. What if all the magic, the monsters, and the gods, what if they're all just metaphors for a very real, very human drama? What if the Ramayana is actually a detailed memory of a huge turning point in history?
To find that hidden history, we have to start where Rama started, in the forest, because this isn't just some symbolic, magical woodland. This was a real place with a very real past.
You see, the epic is super specific. It names the setting, the Dandakaranya forest. And this wasn't a made-up land. It was a known, massive belt of forest that stretched right across central India, a real historical frontier back in the Iron Age. And get this, the archaeology lines up perfectly. We see a landscape that was once a huge, dense forest, home to various tribal societies. Then, right around the period this story is set, we see the first evidence of farming groups pushing into this territory, something made possible by their new iron tools. The epic places Rama in exactly the right place at exactly the right time for this historical clash to happen. Okay, so if the forest is real, what about all the creatures living in it? The next layer of this hidden history comes from decoding the epic's most famous and fantastic characters. So let's talk about the villains, the Rakshasas. They're usually translated as these horrible flesh-eating demons, but who are they really? Well, this is where it gets really cool. If you just strip away the supernatural demon label for a second and look at how the epic describes their actual behavior, a totally different profile emerges. They don't farm. Their power comes from controlling the forest. They actively resist the religious rituals of the newcomers. And they don't have kings in the same way. When you put all those pieces together, that's not the profile of a monster. It's a perfect description of an indigenous, non-state tribal society resisting the people encroaching on their land. Rakshasa probably wasn't a species. It was a political label for the enemy. So on one side, you have the myth. They're supernatural monsters, forces of chaos. But on the other, you have the history. They were just tribal groups who were politically and culturally different. They were framed as demonic others to justify the conflict. It's a pattern we've seen happen in frontier zones all over the world, throughout history. And the same exact logic applies to Rama's allies, the Vanaras, who we know as the monkeys. The myth paints them as magical talking animals, but the history suggests they were actually human clans who lived in and were masters of the forest. All their monkey-like traits, their incredible speed, their knowledge of the terrain, their acrobatic fighting style, those weren't magic. Those were skills perfectly adapted for guerrilla warfare in their forest home. So, now that we understand who the players really were, let's take another look at the plot. Suddenly, Rama's exile doesn't look like aimless wandering anymore. It looks like a political mission with a very clear goal. I mean, just look at his actions like a step-by-step strategy. 1, he sets up hermitages, which basically act like forward operating bases. 2, he protects his priests, which is how you extend your cultural influence. 3, he builds alliances with friendly locals, that's the Vanaras. And 4, he confronts the groups that resist him, the Rakshasas. This isn't a fairy tale quest, it's a textbook manual for state expansion into a frontier. And the epic is filled with raids, ambushes, and constant brutal violence. That's not just mythological drama. As this quote points out, that's what frontiers are like. They're messy, unstable, violent places. The story is just being brutally honest about the reality of what was happening. So the setting is real, the people are real, the politics are real. The final proof, the thing that really seals the deal, is in the tiny details the storytellers chose to remember and pass down. Here you can really see how the Ramayana acts more like history than a myth. Myths are usually vague, right? They happen in a dark forest or a distant kingdom. But the Ramayana? It names specific rivers, follows travel routes that are actually plausible, and gets into the weeds on complex political alliances. It's just geographically and politically precise in a way myths usually aren't. And that, of course, brings us to Ravana's Lanka. In this historical view, Lanka isn't some magical island of demons. No, it represents a real rival power center to the south, a sophisticated kingdom that was a major political and economic competitor to Rama's people in the north. So when you put it all together, the Ramayana is so much more than just a story. It's a preserved cultural memory. It remembers that violent, complex, and world-changing moment when the agrarian states of the north first pushed into the vast tribal frontiers of Iron Age India. And that leaves us with a pretty mind-blowing question, doesn't it? If one of the world's most foundational myths is actually history in disguise, what other stories that we think we know are just waiting to be decoded?